All right, so today we have Scott Traylor, who's going to talk to us about the search engine optimization. He is a founding partner of Sephone Interactive Media and provides search consulting services to clients both large and small. He is also the director of the web media program here at the New England School of Communications, where he's been teaching a course in search engine marketing for many years, and it was actually one of the first to offer such a course by an accredited higher education institution in the state of Maine. So I will hand it over to Scott at this time.
All yours, sir.
Keyboard for advance?
Yeah.
Okay, spacebar. Good morning. I'm Scott Traylor, and you've just heard all about me, and I'm here to talk to you today a little bit about search marketing, search engine marketing at 40,000 feet. I want to sort of remind everybody what search marketing is all about. You may, I'm sure you all know that there are many moving parts to search marketing. It's a time-consuming process. And we're going to talk about some of those moving parts today, and certainly things that you can do as business owners to help your own sites in search, as well as some things that that you might not have any control over. So we're going to talk a little bit before the end about Penguin. Anyone know what Penguin is? Excellent. Okay, so I always find it helpful to start talking about what search marketing really is, because it gets lost in all these moving parts that we have. And the important thing to keep in mind is that it's both an art and a science. It is not a set of rules that you follow. It is not complete magic. It is a little bit of both, with a little bit of intuition thrown in. And as you can see from the definition here, the important words that we want to talk about are information, which is content, and keywords. And fundamentally, everything that we do in search is related to content and keywords. And we do this in order for search engines to have a really good window into our minds in terms of what we're searching for, in order to provide us with a search results page, a SERP, an S-E-R-P. Google, Bing, Ask, and AOL are our top 5 search engines. 67, 16, 12, 3, and 1. Google is 67% of overall search. So when I talk about search marketing, by and large, I'm talking about Google. I'm focusing on Google, although we don't really ignore the other search engines. But because Google has become such a force in the search space, that's really what we're focusing on. 70%, almost 70%. That market share is rising slightly. It used to be Yahoo was number 2. Bing is now number 2. Yahoo is in the midst of reinventing itself, I suppose we could say. And Bing, of course, has its sights on Google. Has anyone seen the Bing ads? Don't get scroogled. It's brilliant. And it is, like, they're not pulling any punches, which is interesting. So anyone know why Google is number 1? Does anyone know what Google's brilliant idea was in 1998? Why Google is sitting on $250 billion of market capitalization today? Why Sergey Brin and Larry Page are so wealthy?
Something to do with their advertising and how they can make those keywords pop up for their advertisers and market.
Right. So that wasn't. Yes, that's true. I mean, they're making their money obviously on leveraging sponsored ads. But even before that, if you think about search engines, those of you who are using search engines prior to 1998, in most cases you go to a search site such as Yahoo or Excite, and what did you see? Lots of clutter, lots of ads. It was all about traditional advertising eyeballs, right? Eyeballs and clicks on these ads that they're just bombarding you. Larry Page's and Sergey Brin's brilliant idea was to find a way to present search results that actually were relevant to what someone might want to search for. Prior to this idea, which I'll tell you in a second, what would happen is you would put a search phrase into a search engine, and really that search phrase would just provide results back from websites that happen to have those keywords on them. And keywords are important, but it wasn't tailored to what exactly the person was searching for. So you could put a search phrase in for pet food, and you might get websites back that were pet food manufacturers, pet food sellers. You might get some sites that had just the word food and pet in it, but not necessarily related. And Larry Page and Sergey Brin's brilliant idea was to say, you know what? We want to provide good search results. We want to provide websites that are going to matter to what people want. So they decided that the only way that they could effectively do that was essentially to count links. So in their search algorithm, they would essentially say, if I have a website and I have 10 people linking to this website, and I have another website, and I've got 100 people or 1,000 people linking to the second website, all with the same key phrases, that second website is more popular than the first website because more people feel that that content is more valuable on that second website. So therefore, when you do your search for pet food, the website that has more links coming to it would rank higher in search results because the content is presumably better because people are voting for it, essentially. A link is a vote. That's important because that is changing slightly, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. So Google has built a business on that simple idea. Yes, they were two pretty smart grad students, but $250 billion in market capitalization from that. Then, of course, they borrowed an idea from Overture.com for this whole idea of micropayments and sponsored listings, which is what you were referring to, which is really what actually started making them money, because they weren't making money for a while. Believe it or not, people still use AOL. I find that to be remarkable. Anyone here use AOL? Thank you. So, there are a lot of moving parts to search marketing. And what I like to do is I break it down really into 4 areas: research, site, inbound, and metrics. And each of these 4 areas is really critical to having a site place well in search results. And it really starts off with market research. You would never think of opening a business or finding a location for a storefront without doing research on your market. And that's so from the standpoint of search marketing, research is not just who your competitors are online, but also who your local competitors are, right? And you always have to keep in mind, what's the focus of the website? If you're a website that's trying to sell t-shirts nationwide, then that's a pretty big physical market. If you're talking about, the United States, that's much different than if you are a local restaurant trying to promote yourself within a smaller geographical region, right? So you have your sort of geographic market, but then you have your online competition as well. And your online competition may have nothing at all to do with what you do in business. But you have to know who those people are. When I say online competition, that means that when I do a search in Google, I'm going to have people that are going to show up in search ahead of me. And those people, as I say, may not necessarily be what you think your direct competition might be, but they are, because they're showing up ahead of you. And in some of those cases, the folks that are showing up ahead of you, in many cases, those might be larger portal sites that get lots of traffic or whatever. But even knowing that, when you do your market research, what you're doing is you're trying to determine what you can, who you're looking at in terms of trying to perform better in search, but also establishing baselines not only for your own site, in terms of, because when we talk a little bit later about measuring results, we have to have something to compare it against. So market research is critical. Keyword research is really the core of what we do in search engine marketing. If you have a website and your website has content on it, it is that content that allows Google, again, when I talk about Google, I talk about all search engines, but it allows Google to identify what your site is about. That is a primary factor. If your website is about pet food, and it sounds obvious, but if your site is about pet food and you don't have a lot of words on your site that talk about pet food, then you're not going to rank very well. That doesn't mean that you're going to overload your website with keywords and key phrases in order to be found. What it means is that you want to make sure that your content on your site reflects, one, what your site is about first, and secondly, reflects the keywords that people use. So keyword research, what we do in search marketing, is we spend quite a bit of time using a series of tools that provide us with some idea of the frequency of search phrases and how people search. So an example might be if you're buying a house, are you going to search, let's say you're buying a house in Bangor. Are you going to search for Bangor homes for sale, Bangor houses for sale, Bangor real estate, right? We have to determine what we want people to search or how people are going to search. And we want to look at those key phrases, and we want to make sure that if the popular key phrase happens to be Bangor real estate, we want to make sure that our website has those key phrases in it. If our website is all about Bangor homes for sale, but more people are searching for Bangor real estate, the chances are that you're going to get found, not found as easily on Bangor real estate. Fair enough? Okay. Site structure and site optimization. And I should also say that all of these are relatively overlapping. These are not all mutually exclusive things that we do. A good example of it would be on-page optimization. Certainly on-page optimization relies on the keyword research that we've done. So when we determine a set of popular phrases, we want to build those into the content in a natural way. Google's number one goal with regard to search is making sure that the content on your website is written for people. Google's business model is built on the simple premise that when someone does a search, that the result set that is given back is the best possible source of information for what the person is searching for. So tactics, we'll talk a little bit about this later, tactics such as overloading sites with keywords or over-optimizing a site can actually and will hurt you in search because Google's algorithm is smart enough to know what you're trying to do. So natural content is critical. So when I talk about keyword research and we talk about on-page optimization and content, the content comes first. Write your content for people, don't write it for search engines. Take advantage of the keyword research that you've done to naturally build in those search phrases, but you don't want to over-optimize. On-page optimization also involves content semantics, which is an important part of what we do in search. And content semantics, and without getting too technical here, really is a method of using the behind-the-scenes HTML to describe the content on your site. So this latest iteration of HTML, there have been a series of new tags, which are essentially semantic tags, which allow Google to better understand what the site is about. So you should probably look at all your sites to make sure that you are at least up to the modern standard, certainly. And then we have other tags that we use to determine, on the particular page, what's the title of the page? What is the page about in terms of sections? And then have subsections which are related to the parent section. All of that is behind the scenes, really. I mean, it might appear that way visually, but behind the scenes in the HTML, that allows Google and other search engines to get a better idea of what the site is about. And if Google has a better idea of what the site is about, then you have a better chance of actually ranking. Site structure, which is also part of the site category, really comes down to, is the site actually built in a modern way? I see sites all the time that really haven't been updated in years, and the behind-the-scenes markup on the site is sloppy, it's bloated, and all that sloppiness and bloatedness that the user doesn't see who visits the site, but the search engines see behind the scenes, means that Google has to work harder to tease the content out of the site. So that's an important feature as well.
It's all the junk that open at the beginning of the page affects.
Well, does it negatively affect search? No, it just makes it harder for search engines to determine what's there. A clean site behind the scenes is ideal. Where there's no question in terms of what the content is on the site. And certainly if you're combining that with some of the semantic tags, it makes it really easy for Google to figure it out. Inbound. This is, in addition to content being critically important, links are critically important. So building an inbound link strategy from relevant websites is critical. And for those of you, you've all been, I'm sure, if you have a website. Everybody in here have a website? I'm guessing we all do, right? So there was a strategy in the old days of this link exchange, right? Call up your buddy, exchange links. That's not a good idea. It's not bad, but it doesn't really help you all that much. Why? Well, again, Google, if you go back to Google's mission of providing the best possible search results, and this idea that they have in terms of link popularity or link quantity coming into your site, then on the surface it might seem that, yeah, okay, well, the more links we have coming into our site, the better. But Google's smart enough to know links that matter and links that don't matter, link relevancy. So if I have a pet store and I've got a brother-in-law who has an auto body shop, and we exchange links, yes, that's an inbound link for both of us. But Google looks at that and says, pet store, auto body shop, different sets of keywords, the relevancy is not there, so it's going to devalue that link. It's also going to devalue it because Google says you're linking back and forth. So Google's algorithm is smart enough to say you guys are exchanging links. You're actually trying to influence the natural search results. The step up from that might be if you've got a pet store and you've got a brother-in-law who has dog grooming, they're a little bit closer, right? So the keywords on both of those sites would be more relevant. And yes, you're exchanging links, but Google would look at that and probably value that a little bit more at least on the two-way side. The best kind of link that you can get is an unsolicited inbound link, which means it's a one-way inbound link. And what that means is a person has decided that your content on your site is important enough for me to link to it from my site. And if my site happens to be related to your site, even better. Those kinds of links are the hardest to get. It's a lot of work. And you can sometimes buy those links, but that would be against Google's best practices. Google doesn't want you to go out and buy inbound links. Because why? If you're buying an inbound link, you're not providing natural inbound linking for natural search. So link building is something that's changing, and this has to do with Penguin, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. We can't talk about inbound, the inbound topic, inbound traffic, inbound links, without talking about basic brand building. Everything that you can do to build your brand, whether it's online or offline, matters in search. We see clients all the time who have storefronts, nice, big, beautiful lit sign out front, and they don't have their URL on it. Why? Somebody drives by, they see the URL. If it's a memorable URL, they are going to hopefully, when they get home, and hopefully not while driving, maybe visit the website. So that's traffic to the site. That inbound traffic affects search. The more popular your site is in terms of overall traffic, the better you're going to rank in search. So any way that you can to build brand is what you want to do. Traditional marketing and advertising. Building brand awareness. And lastly, for inbound, social and local. You guys all know about social. That's why you're here. Social is an excellent way to help build brand, as you know. It is also an excellent way to help drive traffic to your site. Facebook is great. Twitter is great. But you can't say a whole lot about your organization on Facebook or Twitter, which is why you need a website. So that's important. And lastly, none of this matters unless you can actually measure results. So I alluded to this earlier. You need to make sure you have some sort of metric solution on your website. Google Analytics is the one that everybody uses because it's free and it's excellent. If you feel like spending money, there are other solutions out there. But Google Analytics, you're never going to know how well your search campaign has worked unless you have a way to measure it. And if you have a budget, you can also leverage some third-party tools in order to keep tabs on maybe what some of your competitors are doing. There's some free sites out there that allow you to see what your competitors are doing, but all of that information is derived. I'm thinking of Alexa.com, if any of you have heard of Alexa. That is a service that will provide you with some metrics information for competitors' websites, but it's not absolutely accurate because they don't have access to individual analytics, to real-world analytics on sites. And as you measure your results, it's important to adjust. When you see what works and what doesn't work, making changes is important, which means we start all over again. And this is an ongoing process. If you are engaged in a search marketing campaign on your own, or if you have hired an outside firm, this is what they do, or they should do, I should say. And it's a continual process. It is not a kind of a one and done thing. So having said that, quantity is one thing. You can go through all those steps. You can completely optimize your web presence, drive traffic to your website. Quantity matters. But if you do drive traffic to your site and any of these four things are there, it's not going to make a difference. If your site, honestly, is from 2005 or worse, if it looks like it's old, if it's not engaging visually, person who comes to your website, they're going to leave, right? If your site is not usable, if you're selling product online and you go through a search marketing plan and you drive these folks to the website to sell t-shirts online, but when folks get to the website, they don't quite understand that you're an e-commerce site, or if the checkout process of that e-commerce solution is difficult to use, it doesn't make a difference. Search doesn't matter. If their product or service itself is bad, it doesn't matter. Or if people don't want your product or service. You might have this great idea for needlepoint mouse pads, and you might spend a ton of money on a search marketing campaign and an e-commerce solution, but no one is going to search for needlepoint mouse pads. People don't want them. And it sounds obvious, but we see it all the time. People with great ideas that come in that want to do these sorts of things, and then they're surprised when no one's visiting their site, and they can't believe that no one online either searches for needlepoint mouse pads or wants to buy them. So you have to have something that people want, and that's basically marketing 101. So I show this oftentimes because this is a really sort of good distillation. This is derived from a couple of different sources that really shows the progression of what it takes in order to have an effective website from a search point of view. And at the bottom, the base level, you have to plan, you have to understand what the goals are for the particular for the site and for the strategy that you're employing. You have to be aware of what's happening in not only your industry with your competitors, but you have to be aware of what's happening in the search industry. The big Penguin update, which is coming, is a good example of that, which I'll talk about. Patience. It's not magic, and it doesn't happen overnight. That's probably the hardest thing for folks to understand, is if they're engaging with an outside firm and they spend a little bit of money, it could take 1 month, 2 months, 6 months, 8 months to actually see any real benefit from it, because that's just the way that it works. Google, a good example of this would be, let's assume that you have a company, a local company, and you have multiple listings for your local address. Any of you, that ever happened to any of you? So if you go to Google and you might have 2 or 3, now it's within Google Plus, but Google local listings. You can merge those listings together, and you can tell Google to do that for you. It can take weeks or months for their data to catch up to that request. It's a slow-moving train, unless Google decides to run an algorithm update, in which case those changes happen right away. That's always fun. So patience is key. And then, of course, as I mentioned in the previous, talking about having a quality website to go along with all the traffic that your quality website or product go along with the traffic that you're driving, is you really have to have a good site, right? That's base. If you don't have a decent website that people are going to use when you do drive traffic to it, it doesn't make a difference. People are not going to buy your product or service. There's not going to be a conversion. So then we've got market research, keyword research, which we've sort of talked about, analytics, which is metrics, content and links / social are right up there towards the top. But the very tip of the pyramid here is this thing called trust. And trust is both with regard to people who are going to visit your site, to the internet community, the web community in general. If they trust your site and they trust your content, they're going to link to you, they're going to use your website, you're going to get traffic. Trust also means that Google trusts you, that you're not doing anything, shall we say, tricky behind the scenes to try to spam their search engine. And that's really what Google does when it looks at modifying its algorithm. It's always modifying its algorithm in a minor way, and it's, several major changes, but it's always modifying its algorithm in order to provide the best possible search results for what folks want. And that always includes penalizing websites that are taking advantage of either a loophole or an oversight in the way that Google does this. Now, the thing about Google is they don't tell you exactly what you have to do. That would undermine their business model. Again, if their business model is to provide the best possible search results, they're not going to tell everybody exactly what they have to do for best possible search results, because that undermines what they're trying to do, right? So they're very secretive about changes they make to their algorithm. There's a series of best practices that everyone should follow, but they don't say exactly what they do. And there's this in the search professional community, there are long discussions of it's like the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve used to be less plain language, and they'd have all this language, all the words and the language and the metaphors that they would use, or sort of to get around what their intent was. That's kind of like Google. Google is the Fed of the web. They don't coin that. They don't. They're not clear, intentionally not clear, which makes it interesting for us because we have to sort of presume what they're up to. So Penguin. So the Penguin and Panda, the updates are made. These are a series of updates that Google has been running over the past year or so. Penguin is the one which we all presume is related to a link quality filter that is currently sort of riding on top of your normal algorithm. And what Google has been doing with link quality is they've been looking at all of the data. And Google has a lot of data. People talk about big data, in terms of enterprise level solutions. Google is humongous data. I mean, they have data which it's mind-blowing. Well, Google, in their Penguin update, what they're looking at is the quality of these inbound links. So we talk about content being important, which content is important. If you have good, honest content, your site's probably going to do okay if you're sort of doing all these other things along with it. And then this notion of inbound linking. So this is still a critical component to Google's ranking algorithm. And Penguin represents, from what everyone can tell, and this is going to be the next few weeks, the next few months, Google doesn't say, they just sort of say, hey, something's coming. It means that they're going to be looking at inbound linking much differently. And it will have a major impact on search engine results. It'll be big. The last was Panda update. What ends up happening is we have, in the industry, there are metrics which are kept sort of outside looking into Google, and sort of these global analytics across providers' websites, and they can measure general impact of algorithm changes based on how many search pages are affected in the time period immediately following when Google rolls out one of these changes. The last update was a series of updates, and probably over the course of a few months it affected maybe 30% of all search results, which means you either went up a little bit or more likely down a little bit when Google reconfigures how it's going to rank pages. This is one which everyone is thinking could be big, which means that you may be on page one day, and after this algorithm runs, you're doing everything right, but you may be on page 2 the next day, which means that you've got to do more work in order to get yourself back to page 1. So what is Penguin Update going to do? Well, what Google is looking at is this notion of natural inbound linking. It has been really up to this point a best practice to, from what I said earlier, you want to get natural inbound one-way links, right? But people are paying for them. And Google can't tell who pays for what link, right? They don't know what goes on. So they've come up with, presumably, they've come up with a method where they can actually look at what are called bad neighborhoods online. So bad neighborhoods really refers to sort of two different things. One is if you have a website that happens to be providing, let's say you have a web provider, and that web provider has, or let's just say that you've got I'll take it from the standpoint of an IP address. We all know what an IP address is, right? An IP address is a unique address for a device on the internet or a range of IPs. Those are usually clustered together. So if you have a series of websites that are all clustered around the same similar IP addresses, and they're all, even if they're one-way links, but they're all coming from that range of IP addresses, there's a pattern there. And from Google's perspective, Google's going to say, you know what? That's not natural. That's something's funny there. So they're going to devalue any of those links which are coming from that bad neighborhood. And the other thing to think about bad neighborhoods is this, it's not new, but link trust versus, and I'll say link quality. So we've all heard of PageRank. You know what PageRank is named after? Larry Page. Thank you. Good. Excellent. People think it's PageRank because it's a web page, but it's actually, Larry named it after himself. But I suppose you can do that when you sit on a pretty big pile of money. PageRank is an important factor in measuring the value of an inbound link. The higher the PageRank, and the PageRank is if you fill up to it and you Google PageRank formula, it's scary because it is a really crazy algorithm that calculates what a site's particular page rank might be. But that is one factor in the greater algorithm that Google uses in order to determine the quality of an inbound link. So, for instance, getting back to my example about linking back and forth from sites, what I left out of that was if I'm a pet store, if I'm a local pet store, and I've got a dog grooming place that links to me, my brother-in-law's dog grooming shop, and that site is not very popular, has a low page rank. That's a good inbound link because we're related, but if I get Petco to link to me, one way, unsolicited, that is a hugely valuable inbound link because number one, it's one way, number two, it's coming from a really popular website, so that helps me out. I get that link juice, right? So it builds up my page rank by having that inbound link come to me. So that's page rank, and that's fine. You can have great inbound links with great page rank, but these sites with great page rank might be in bad neighborhoods, or they might be cause of a bad neighborhood. So there's another measure which we presume that Google is using, which is this link trust measure, which is Google has determined online various websites which it deems to be paragons of virtue. CNN is one. Wikipedia is another. And you can probably identify those sites that are popular brand names that have a lot of brand equity. That, along with all of the other factors that go into it, Google has said these guys are they're it. They're at the top of the heap. Link trust is related to that concept. It's not necessarily a page rank passing, but if I have CNN and there's a blog on CNN, so that's a popular blog, and there's a website which is another blog site, let's say, and that CNN blog links directly to this blog site here. That's a very trusted link because the people at CNN felt it was important to link to that. Not from a page rank standpoint, but from this notion of link trust. Then, if I've got my website over here, which is the pet food store, if that same blog links to my pet store, I get some of this link trust from Google's perspective. So that's a good thing. In a way, it's kind of like the Kevin Bacon game. The closer you can get to these sites which are highly trusted, the better. Because therefore it's presumed that you're trusted. CNN trusts this blog trusts me. So I get that. The problem is that Google doesn't tell you what these paragons sites are. So you have to, to guess. If I were just to tell a client this, I would say just try to get as close as you can to these other sites in terms of link distance. And that's something that is presumed to be in the Penguin update. Link velocity. Sounds like a bad name for a band. But Google is looking at, or presumably is going to be looking at, how many links and how fast sites get them. So if I have a website and I've built up really good links based on everything that we've talked about, and that has happened incrementally over time in a natural way, that site is going to rank higher than a site who blasts onto the scene and all of a sudden has all these good links. Because Google says that's not natural. Now, we don't know what that rate of velocity is. But building links slowly over time has more value certainly than sites that get lots of links really fast. Anchor text and relevancy. Relevancy we kind of talked about already. Google is probably tweaking its algorithm in terms of the whole pet store auto parts idea. It's going to be better at making sure that when I link to a site, that link is actually a relevant link in terms of the natural tendency for those sites to be linked together. Anchor text. This is a change, and this is something that this is a big wait and see. Up to this point, anchor text has always been an important part of any link building strategy. Even on your own sites, link back and forth to content on your own site within your content. That counts as an inbound link. From outside your site, the strategy to this day has always been to keyword as best as possible the link that's linking over to the site. So if I am selling, we'll do the grooming and pet food example here. If I'm on the grooming site and there's a link on the grooming site which is going to say buy your pet food at Scott's Pet Food Store, up to this point we would have created a phrase in that link which would be buy pet food, right? Because we want to pass that link text to Google so that Google knows better what that relevancy is between those two sites. Google is discovering in all of its big data that that's really not all that natural. What's happening is that Google's looking at, well, let's take a look at Google from Google's perspective. Let's take a look at all of the links that are coming from these Paragon sites that are going to these other sites, and they're finding out that those links are more brand oriented, and in that if you're linking to the pet food store in this case, the link would be better off served to say Scott's Pet Food. That's more natural. And even links such as the click here link or the more information link, those were always devalued in the past, and Google, it's presumed that Google is changing its algorithm to sort of make those more valuable because that's more natural for what people do online. And if you've ever done any content massaging on your own sites in order to try to get those keywords into links, you know that that's sometimes a hard thing to do because you have to make it sound like normal. This is a big deal, and we're going to see what's going to happen with how this is going to affect everything. So I wouldn't run out and make any changes on your site now. I think this is something that we're going to see play itself out over the next several months. And lastly, social sharing. It's what we're here for today. Google is building more, is making social share more of a factor in its search algorithm. So getting those Facebook likes, getting Twitter followers is pretty important. Now, the issue is that Google always has a tough time measuring this, which is one of the reasons that Google would like you to be logged into their services all the time as you travel the web, so that Google can keep track of everywhere that you've gone. And it will know what's valuable and what's not valuable based on who you are and what you've clicked on. Did you know that Google does that? Okay. That's scary to me. But. So, what can you do? Maybe. This is about Penguin. And this is more or less just a reiteration of what we talked about. So on your own sites, you should probably find out who's linking to you. Take a look at those websites, see if you can determine whether or not they are of high page rank, and see if anything actually looks like it's fishy. And if you have sites that are linking to you that you don't want to link to you because you feel that they are going to detract from your search position, then you can go to Google and you can use their disavow tool. And you can tell Google to disavow the link that is linking to you. And at Google's whim, they will build that into your search results. As I said earlier, I don't think that we want to jump on the train of changing our exact key phrase-based anchor text just yet. But I put it up here. I think maybe going forward, you might want to think about using more branded anchor text. And I would say don't be afraid of using the, learn more information. Click here is one that I'm on the fence about because from a usability standpoint, that is just a major faux pas. You're on the web, you have a link, people know to click, right? You don't have to tell them to click here. It's like you don't see signs on the side of the road that say, you know, drive this way, right? You just know how to do it. Find sites related to yours, subject, business, industry, that are very active in social shares and build those relationships. This has to do sort of with the last comment here about bad neighborhoods, but this is more or less the sites that get lots of social shares. So if you are an accountant and you have a website that you visit often that gets a ton of shares for accountants, you want to do your best to see if you can try to build a relationship with that site. Because that social sharing will pass to you, because social sharing is going to become one of those factors in determining one of these paragons of virtue of a web presence, and it makes sense. Just as a link is a vote, if you've got a ton of people sharing content on a website, that content's valuable content. People want it. They want to share it. So that's critical. And lastly, you want to make sure that, and this sort of back to the first one, make sure that you've got inbound links that are not coming out of bad neighborhoods. You might want to take a look at your websites and see if you have any, like links pages are generally not a good idea, certainly if the links on those links pages are not relevant. So keep that in mind. Important. It's all about link juice. Common sense takeaways. So just summarizing everything that I've mentioned here this morning, first and foremost is trust. It's good, honest content. Don't try to overdo it in terms of keywords. Be natural about it, but talk about your product. Talk a lot about your product or service. Websites that don't have any content will never get ranked. So I've seen websites where it's a great product, a great service, but there's only a paragraph of text about it. I'm going to talk more about those about your product or service on your website. It doesn't mean you have to force people to read it by putting it right there on the landing page. You can always provide additional pages with more information deeper in the site. The more pages a website has, the better, because Google perceives that as you got a website that's got a lot of content, so you must be important. So lots of content is good. It doesn't mean you have to force people to read it. You can sort of bury some of that content a link down or 2 links down. Semantically well-structured content. Make sure that the content on your site is organized in a way that Google can interpret it, as we talked about certainly with the semantic tags in HTML, as well as simple heading tags, H1s, H2s, and H3s. No gimmicks, no black hat. There's a whole school of, there's probably a sub-industry out there for people who try to spam the search engines. They find ways, they find loopholes, and they employ these tactics on their clients' websites in order to give them a boost in search. And oftentimes that boost in search will work. It doesn't work forever. And if the offense is egregious enough from Google's point of view, you can get removed from the index entirely. In most cases, they just push your site way down. Good URLs. Don't have Amazon.com style URLs. You've all been to Amazon.com. You look up in the URL, and you've got a whole big long query string, no keywords. Amazon can get away with this because they're Amazon, right? They don't have to worry about people searching for them online. They have tons of brand equity, right? Their brand is built. And their site gets a boatload of traffic. It's number 5. It might be number 5. And that's after Google, Facebook, YouTube, top 3 web properties. So Amazon's a very popular site. So when you have a website, you have it built. If you have a website now, look up into the URL. If you don't see page names in the URL and you see crazy stuff, if you don't see keywords in the URL, then you need to get that fixed, because that's a critical part in Google's algorithm, for sure. So Google looks at, when it talks about page relevancy, it looks at the content on the page, it looks at page titles, it looks at the URL, it looks behind the scenes at the description, which is the snippet that appears in Google search results pages. It looks at all of those things as what the site is about. And when Google can figure that out, then you're going to rank better, ultimately. And lastly, again, leverage social as much as possible. So I can't imagine anyone here does not have a Facebook presence or potentially a Twitter account or any of the other social platforms. Leverage them as much as possible, leverage them all in a way that makes sense for you. When you're doing posts, if you're posting about your business, don't be afraid to occasionally put a link back to your website in your posts. What you're trying to do is you're trying to create a stream of traffic to the website. So that's critically important as well. And I would like to thank you. If you have any questions, I would love to answer them. Yes?
I guess I'll have a question, but this is all very interesting, and it's good to understand, but would you recommend to the average Facebook administrator for a business to actually get into their website, or would you say just go hire a professional? Because
Right.
there's so much here.
There is. I teach, as mentioned, I teach an entire course on search marketing, an entire semester, and that is not enough time to cover in any meaningful way all the moving parts of search. There's a lot to it. That doesn't mean that you can't do a lot of this on your own. That's certainly possible. It's time consuming. I mean, it's time consuming for professionals who know the ropes. It takes time. So on top of that, you've got to add learning all of this and then employing those tactics. So I think it's a combination of both. It requires, when you're providing search services for a client, it's on both sides. If the search company is going to do the research, they know the ropes, they're going to make recommendations and suggestions, but unless you're hiring a social media person or a company to perform social media services, which are going to make all those Facebook updates for you, or write your blog for you, or change content on your website for you, then you've got to do some of that on your own. And the good, what I would do is we provide tips and pointers for folks who do update their own content on the website or manage their own Facebook presences, in order to tell them, every once in a while you got to do this. If you're going to create a link on your site, make sure you link the link. And then, of course, on a periodic basis, when reports are run, that's reviewed, to make sure that all of that stuff is going on. So the answer to that question is there's a lot of that you can do yourself. If you have a small site, it's probably a heck of a lot easier to handle. If you're in a smaller market, if your geographical, if your customer base is in a local or regional area, that's a little easier to deal with than if you are trying to sell a product nationwide online. So I think to get the ball rolling, oftentimes you need the help of a professional just for the guidance and to get it set up the right way. Yes.
I have a couple of questions.
Okay.
The first one is, you talked about inbound links. What about outbound links? I know
They don't matter. Nope, not at all.
The second
You're helping the person on the other end, or hurting the person on the other end of that link.
Okay.
So.
The other question has to do with photographs. I'm in a process of coming up with a cataloging plan for photographic database. How important is it to keyword these photographs?
Important.
Yeah.
So depending, and they're being displayed online?
Yes.
Yeah. So I would just make sure that when they're displayed online, you want to describe. They're important from a couple of different reasons. One, they're important because we have to be aware of ADA compliance, right? So Americans with Disability Act, we want to make sure that the image itself has the appropriate title tag and alt tags so that screen readers can read what the image is about. But when you describe the image and what the image is about, you also want to keyword as best as possible in as natural a way what that image represents. So if it's an easy one is a product image. You don't want to put your SKU number, as your title or alt tag on the image. What you want to do is describe the product, that it is, XYZ widget, 20 ounces or whatever it might be. So yes, keyword dredges. Yes.
I've been hearing a lot about, Google being the big player in town, so that it's important to have a Google Plus account because they kind of favor, of course, if you go with their social media network, not necessarily keeping it updated as much as Facebook and Twitter, but
Who does?
Just to have your business have a page.
Mm-hmm.
Curious in that is that when we're talking about Google Analytics, is there some favoritism if you've got their code in your HTML?
Well, so
Google Analytics
the party line from Google is that use of their services does not influence organic search. That's the party line, and I think they have to say that, because if they didn't say that, they could get, well, number one, I think it undermines their business model, right? Because again, they're supposed to be completely agnostic in terms of the search results that they give. Best results based on the search phrase. So, but alternatively, I think they could find themselves, because of their market share, if they didn't say that, there could be some legal issues, obviously, by favoring their products over others. And I'm sure that Bing and Yahoo, Ask, and AOL would probably object if Google favored, their services. Having said that, I have noticed that they favor services. So you can, right?
I've noticed I've got two sites that run Google Analytics and another site that runs, a paid for analytics, and it seems like updates happen quicker on the pages.
You will not find one word anywhere written that is the case, I'm sure, and I don't know for sure that they favor, but I've noticed that as well. Even with Google Maps, embedding a Google map on the website, and there might be some sort of a side benefit to that, because if you have a Google map on the website, then when Google generates its local listings, it has a good idea that this business belongs to this location. So there's that part of it, but that's not a direct use my service, get a better, get better ranking. The tricky thing with Google is, and it goes back to social. I give a lecture on what Google's end game is, which we don't have time to do here. It's a long lecture, but if you think about it, Google Plus was, in my view, the short story here is that Google Plus was in no way an attempt to compete with Facebook. Google doesn't care about that. The forward face might be that's what they're trying. No, what they're trying to do is they want to become sort of the nexus of everyone's social graph, which is why when Google Plus first came out, it was the blogger who tried to sign up for an alias, and Google wouldn't give them the account. They had to use their real name. Because what Google wants is they want that code. They want to be able to identify individuals who they are, ultimately to become sort of, it's what Facebook wants too, is to become sort of the center of your social media world, which is really your life now. And the second part of that is by having folks sign up for Google Plus, having the Google local listings now merge with your Google Plus pages. There's this back-end migration on Google to sort of unify a lot of their services, really is so that folks will be logged into a Google service when they're on the web, because that provides Google with a ton of information. Google knows, since day one, it knows every, this is a gross exaggeration, understand that, but it really knows every website that anyone has ever visited. It doesn't know that you are you, or that you're you, but it knows that someone from a particular IP address on the machine went to this particular website, and it can derive patterns from all of that. But it doesn't know who you are. Facebook knows who you are, right? Facebook knows who you are, it knows who your friends are, it knows who you like, right? That's a lot of information. So Google needs that in order to provide better search results, and more importantly, and we sort of sidestep this, those better search results are key to how Google makes its money, which is on ads, right? So when you do a search in Google, that is a window into your mind of what you're interested in. And if it's a window into your mind in terms of what you're interested in, then Google can show ads based on that interest, which is all how sponsored ads work. Who here clicks on sponsored ads? Every once in a while? A lot? Yeah. Usually when I ask that question, almost no one raises their hand. And yet Google sits on a
They
pretty
changed the
pretty
color
big
of the
pile of
box.
money because people do. It's all
They
volume.
changed the color of the box. Remember how it used to
Right.
be darker, now it's
Yeah.
much, it's a little trickier. You have to
Yeah,
look
it's-
a little harder.
yeah, they're making it less obvious that it's a sponsored ad because that is Google's bread and butter. So, for them to provide the best possible search results really means that they're providing a better opportunity to look into the mind of the person who's searching for something in order to get them to click on something so that Google can make money. So that is the other reason I feel that why they don't say they favor their own services, that's what they really want. And that's and bottom line, that's I think what Google Plus is really all about. It's just about getting people to be logged in. Yes?
I don't speak a whole lot of IT jargon, so maybe you'll have to help me form
Mhm.
a question. You talked about these inbound links,
Mhm.
but then you talked about them being unsolicited. Suppose you wanted to set up a site for a service or business product, and you knew who you wanted to link to, and you wanted to approach them
Mm-hmm.
and see if they had a willingness to link to you.
You can do that. I wouldn't exchange a link. I mean, that's still a strategy. If you can identify a site that is like yours, that's sort of in the same sort of genre of what it is that you do, there is nothing wrong with, Google's best practices would say don't solicit, right? Let it happen naturally. Let that site link to you naturally. But that might be unrealistic. So the next step would be, hey, I know you. Would you be willing to link to my site? And if they felt that it was important to link to your site, then they would, right? So that, in a way, is kind of okay. It's on the borderline. If they say, sure, we'll link to your site, and you're going to give us $20 a month, or we'll do it for $100, that is not within Google's best practices. So there is that little gray area in between where you can ask, but you can't pay. But Google doesn't know if you pay. They don't, and because it's all about this, about net etiquette. It's all about sort of good behavior online. Google's "Don't be evil" mantra, because it really does undermine their business. If everyone went out and paid for links from everybody else, then Google doesn't exist. If you really think about it, if you take that out to its logical conclusion. So, and that's why they continually adjust their algorithm, is to account for that as best they can. Yeah. Question?
I was just thinking to try to generate links, establish connections, maybe something like a shared coupon, or maybe an interview with someone from another site where you've actually got, you're not just saying like, here's a link, but you've got some reason to be linking between partners.
Right.
To establish something like that might be, maybe adding a little more creative twist to it might make it a little more valid.
Exactly. That's an excellent strategy. You have to be careful in terms of Creative Commons if you're going to use any of the content from the other site on your site, meaning make sure you have the copyright ability to do that. But yeah, I mean that Google loves that. If you can, that's value. It's value for the human being who's reading it, rather than just a link. If you're describing it a little bit and linking over, over time those things build naturally. You also have to be careful about duplicate content, having the same exact content in other places online. Google will penalize you for that as well. Yeah, it's a good point. Be vigilant. So I expect that if you are, you want to take a look at your website. You want to make sure that your website doesn't have anything that might appear to be. I think if you're dealing with a provider who is providing search services, the presumption is that provider is doing best practices, what they should do. But if you're curious about it, then you can sort of look behind the scenes. The easiest black hat technique that used to be used, which Google caught on to very quickly, was this notion of making the text on the website the same color as the background of the website, and overloading that text with a bunch of keywords, right? So the human being couldn't see it, but the search engines could. That's a really basic example of what a black hat technique might be. But there are other techniques out there You know, you have to be, you have to trust in your provider, and just don't engage in those techniques yourself. So, you know, knowing your own website is probably the best way to fight back on that, for sure. Google's pretty smart. Google doesn't just look at content. Google can look inside CSS files. It can look inside JavaScript files. It's pretty smart. The people at Google, they know what they're doing. You know, and again, their mission is best possible search results. Good. Well, thank you. I hope that was helpful.